in association with Jaqua Lighting, inspired by the sun, moon and stars.
Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching Gravitas here on WION, your definitive source for unadulterated global news from a uniquely South Asian perspective. Tonight we have a power-packed show for you. We focus on West Asia, specifically Iraq, where the Daesh or the so-called Islamic State is on the retreat. And as it loses ground, it has resorted to destroying everything that comes in its way, even if it was the historic Grand Al-Nouri Mosque in Mosul and its leaning minaret. It comes amid reports that the Islamic State's chief Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi may have been killed in Russian airstrikes near the terrorist group's de facto capital of Raqqa in Syria. We also dissect the Qatar crisis for you. The tiny emirate has 10 days to agree to 13 demands put forth by its big neighbor, Saudi Arabia. But first, we set our sights firmly on Washington, D.C. in the U.S. to preview Prime Minister Narendra Modi's much-anticipated visit there over the weekend. So let's get started. But first up, a look at the headlines. Reports quoting Russian defense agencies say the fact that ISIS leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead is near 100% certain. Baghdadi could have been killed in an airstrike on the city of Raqqa. Bombs killed nearly 30 people in Pakistan on Friday, with a suicide car bomber killing at least 13 in the southwestern city of Quetta, and 2 blasts later killing at least 15 in the northwestern town of Parchinar. And China on Friday asked India and the US not to disturb peace in the strategic South China Sea and play a constructive role in the disputes there. The issue is likely to be discussed between Mr. Modi's meeting with President Donald Trump next week. Good evening and welcome. Now, we are just days away from a crucial meeting between the one who wants to make America great again, US President Donald Trump, and the other, Narendra Modi, who is promoting Make in India. Now, how productive will their meeting be? Will they strike a repo as Modi did with Trump's predecessor, Barack Obama? WION's correspondent Archit Seshadri is on the ground in the US Capitol and filed this report. Take a look.
Donald Trump and Narendra Modi will meet face-to-face for the first time on Monday in Washington, D.C. Both are strong-willed, dominating personalities. How will their chemistry work out? Trump is known for his handshakes, Modi for his creative gifts. Both are also loud personalities, active on Twitter, and both are riding a nationalistic wave, pushing for domestic jobs and homegrown products. India and the United States had strong ties during the Obama administration. Will that continue with Trump in office? Trump is expected to push Modi to buy more. The U.S. is a major arms supplier to India, and deals could be made for unarmed drones to help with India's Navy. But Modi is pushing the Make in India campaign. He wants foreign arms suppliers to set up shop in India and transfer technology. Trump is pushing the America First model and wants U.S. companies to invest locally and not move factories overseas. Trump's recent review of the H-1B visa program, which brings in thousands of skilled Indian workers, especially in the field of IT, is also a major concern for India. It may also force Indian students looking to study in the U.S. to consider other options given the potential visa issues. Trump is trying to foster stronger ties with India's neighbor China to help him tackle North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Trump spoke with Modi earlier this year, and officials from both countries are discussing a host of issues, including terrorism and Afghanistan. As the U.S. reviews its options in Afghanistan, will India be asked to send troops to battle the Taliban? Will Trump crack down on Pakistan's support of terror groups?
All right, joining me on the discussion tonight is my colleague Archit Seshadri, who is joining us from Washington, D.C. We're also joined from the U.S. by Sanjeev Joshipura, Director of Indiaspora. And in the studio with me here is Ambassador Shiv Shankar Mukherjee, former ambassador to the UK. All right, coming to you, Archit, give us a flavor, if you will, of the atmospherics obtaining in Washington on the eve of Prime Minister Modi's visit.
Yeah, Ramesh, that's right. It's about 72 hours before Modi and Trump will meet face-to-face the first time. Both of those leaders will, in fact, meet in person. They've had conversations over the phone in the past. They've certainly exchanged pleasantries over Twitter. But this will be the first time they actually talk, so it'll be interesting to understand the dynamic, the body language, the chemistry, and the big question will be, who will dominate the conversation? Will it be Trump or will it be Modi, and how productive will that meet be? Unlike some of the previous meets in which Modi has been in the U.S. before, during the Obama administration, there's been huge fanfare, lots of parades, but things will be a little bit scaled down this time. It is not an official state visit, but they will have certainly a lot to talk about in their meet. Of course, the H-1B visa, everything from technology to trade to terrorism. And what is the most interesting thing about both of this is they are both pushing for a homegrown campaign. Of course, Trump's Make America Great campaign and Modi's Make in India campaign. So that will be interesting to see how all of that dynamic plays out. We understand from the MEA that Modi will be meeting with CEOs as well from the Indian American community here, as well as members from the local diaspora before meeting with official ministers and, of course, the man in the White House, Donald Trump himself. So the excitement is slowly building up, but again, a little bit early right now. It's only Friday here, and of course, that meet will take place Monday in the nation's capital.
Right, and coming to you now, Sanjeev. Sanjeev, what are your expectations from this visit?
Yeah, thank you for having me. You know, it's hard to say, to be honest, in the sense that expectations were a little bit low to start with, given that it was not a state visit, given that it was fairly hastily arranged on short notice. But you never know, really. You know, both of these people, Donald Trump and Narendra Modi, are both deal makers. And, you know, one may hope for positive surprises at the end of it all. I mean, both of them, it has to be said, are riding a wave of very strong very strong political sentiment at home. I mean, Mr. Modi, we know, has won elections in UP recently. And Donald Trump, in addition to winning his own election, obviously has now won 4 closely contested congressional seats for the Republican Party. So, you know, they have a strong backing among the people that support them. And they're both instinctive for an upside positive surprise, keeping in mind that to start with, expectations have been fairly low.
Right. Ambassador Mukherjee, if I can bring you in the discussion tonight, Sanjeev using very, a different phraseology, if I can put it that way, no big expectations, hastily arranged visit. Would you agree with that submission of Sanjeev's?
Not really. But I must say I look upon it from a different perspective. After having spent 40 years in diplomacy and in arranging visits like this, frankly, to describe this as a visit where there are low expectations, in fact, seems to me to be an advantage. Sometimes I agree very, very strongly with what one of our former ambassadors to the US said, Ronan Sen, that the best visits are those in which there is no outcome. Because when the media concentrates on something, some headline-grabbing measure,
sure,
and if that doesn't come about, the visit is described as a failure. The fact is that no visits can be described as hastily arranged. Even if it were arranged 24 hours earlier, I can assure you that every single aspect would have been the leaders, particularly with countries as large and as practiced in diplomacy as India and the US, would have been solidly briefed. And let's not forget that the lead up to this meeting is between the head of state and the head of government of 2 countries who already have a very strong, very multifaceted relationship, where a huge amount of work through God knows how many dozens of working groups, quite apart from people to people and business relations, carries on all the time, even though they don't grab headlines. The most important thing, I think, in this visit is not going to be H-1B visas. I can assure you the Prime Minister is not going to pull out a list from his pocket and tick off H-1B visas or any other thing. This is a meeting, the first meeting between him and the President of the United States, probably the most important partner at present and in looking at the future for India in terms of its aspirations. This will be a meeting where each will try to find comfort level with the other. For Prime Minister Modi, it will be an occasion to build the right chemistry with the US leader.
Absolutely.
Regardless of Trump and the worldwide kind of extreme reactions that he produces in various countries. The fact is he is the President of the United States, which is a country of the greatest importance to us in our international relations. This will be a conversation which will flow in terms of their vision. And to put it in, very simplistically but accurately, I think, as far as I'm concerned, he will try to show to President Trump that making America great again and Make in India are two partnering visions. That India's strategic, that the US and India have a huge strategic synergy which has been demonstrated in our relations over the last few years, and that this has to be built upon, and that President Trump's aspirations for keeping America first does not conflict, but actually is a synergy with India's aspirations, because in many ways we are natural partners. This is going to be the sum and substance of the meeting, and this is where we will judge the success of the meeting. I have no doubt it will be successful. Prime Minister Modi has shown a tremendous ability to create that kind of chemistry with world leaders.
Indeed. If I can bring Archit back in the discussion. Archit, now we've heard Ambassador Mukherjee, lay the ground, as it were, for the visit. He says that one should focus on the personal chemistry between the two leaders, not necessarily on the details of the issues that bedevil the relations. What are your expectations from your vantage point? Is it going to be the issues such as defense, security, trade and investments, H-1B visa, for instance? Or are we looking at the big picture of the personalized diplomacy on the part of both leaders?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one of the biggest issues at this point they both will have to address certainly could be about terrorism and some of the bilateral topics between India and the United States. But again, as we mentioned, this is a very interesting, very interesting time for all of this to sort of take place. One thing that we do want to talk about is Donald Trump has been so busy dealing with domestic issues, dealing with finding a way to repeal Obamacare, dealing with the situation with the Russian involvement with last year's election. So he's had his plate full dealing with domestic policies and really doesn't have a whole host of foreign policy experience. This year, Modi has visited so many world leaders already within the first half of the year. He's met Emmanuel Macron. He's been to Spain. He's been to Germany. He's been to Russia, Kazakhstan, Sri Lanka. In fact, after his U.S. trip, he'll be meeting with world leaders from the Netherlands and Portugal as well. So clearly the difference in between Modi and Trump is a world apart when it comes to dealing with foreign policy. But again, the chemistry will be important. We certainly know about the handshakes or the lack of handshakes when it comes to Donald Trump and his meet. So that'll be something to sort of observe and see how the body language sort of transpires between Trump and Modi. And Modi is known for getting creative gifts. What type of a gift will he give Donald Trump? That'll be interesting to observe as well. We know that Modi and Obama had a very fruitful relationship, but Trump and Modi have started off on a good note. We know that Trump has called Modi to congratulate him with his recent win for the UP state elections. They're both loud personalities. They're big personalities, and they frequently communicate on social media platforms directly to the people on Twitter and Facebook. So certainly it will be an interesting meet between the two who will dominate the conversation. But again, it might be too early to speculate how big of a development this is going to be. They're going to talk perhaps about China, perhaps about Pakistan, but this could just be to start the diplomatic front between India and the U.S. In fact, Donald Trump has a lot of property in India, so certainly he'll want to mend and continue that relationship to foster the growth between India and the U.S.
All right, Archit, Sanjeev and Ambassador Mukherjee, please stay on while we continue to focus on another issue of this bilateral relationship. Now, if international headlines are anything to go by, India seems to have arrived. Now, for most of the 70 years since independence, the international media picked cliches, hard luck stories and would paint mostly unattractive and dark pictures of India. Disease and poverty guaranteed a headline. India's then modest space program never qualified, but India has come a long way since then. And WION's foreign editor, Padma Rao, gives us a selection of what the media are saying in this next report. Take a look.
For the exotic picture, there were Maharajas, fakirs on nail beds and snake charmers. For reinforcing the horrors, there was disease, illiteracy, poverty, and who didn't love a good famine? That was India, as reflected in the foreign media since attaining independence from the British and for much of the past half-century. A German newspaper reporting on a visiting Indian PM? Unlikely. Or a daily in Singapore running an in-depth piece on why Mr. Modi is travelling to the United States? Unheard of. But along with Prime Minister Modi's suitcases, India is now making it to a motley media headlines across the world. Take Germany, a country with no historical links to India, unlike Britain. German Chancellor Angela Merkel and India's PM Modi see eye to eye over many issues, ran a headline during the PM's visit to Germany last month in top German daily Frankfurter Allgemeine. Modi in Germany, Merkel wants closer cooperation with India, ran another on German television channel ZDF's website. The interest in the Indian PM's movement seems sustained. The PM's impending itinerary takes him not to Singapore, but the United States, and yet the Asian country's Straits Times ran an in-depth analysis. But it's not just India's massive consumer market that is attracting interest. Even Yoga Day found its place in the sun. No shame to bend over backwards. Millions celebrate World Yoga Day, ran a headline in Germany's noted business magazine Manager. Recently, even the cautious New York Times had rare words of praise for India, a country it has often slammed for its bad air. But times seem to have changed most of all in a country which was treated as a pariah by India, given the latter's support for Palestine for the major part of the past half-century, Israel, where Prime Minister Modi will land in early July. Both the Times of Israel and the venerated Jerusalem Post and a host of others have kept Modi and India firmly in their headlines. From an outcast to a permanent presence in the international media, India has come a long way. And going by comments by various economic analysts about a megastar who carries charisma wherever he goes, a certain Indian Prime Minister may have a lot to do with it. Padma Rao, WION.
All right, before I bring in Sanjeev Joshipura and Ambassador Mukherjee back into the discussion, I want to go once across to Archit, who is standing by in Washington. Archit, what are the scenes around you at this moment as we speak? What are the people saying there who might have, you might have spoken with them this morning?
Yeah, Ramesh, that's right. There's not a whole lot of media coverage just yet. But of course, as we mentioned, it's only Friday here. That meet will take place on Monday. But let me sort of show you the scene around here where we are. This is right behind the White House in Washington, D.C. And there's a whole load of tourists who typically come here to try to get a quick picture. Unfortunately, because we're going live, we're sort of blocking them from taking these pictures. And over here to my right, as you can see, that is the Washington Monument. So a whole line of tourists trying to get a picture, get a taste of the nation's capital. In fact, on my Uber drive over here, we're talking to the driver, and he said that a lot of people still are not supporting Donald Trump. I mean, we were here back in November during the presidency when Trump beat Clinton, and there was a whole mixed opinion about whether it should be Trump or whether it should be Clinton, or we had two bad candidates. But even now, fast forward 7 months since he won the election, and he's been in office now about 6 months, a lot of people are telling me that Donald Trump is one of the most bizarre presidents in U.S. history, and they just really don't know what he's going to do. Every day he's making the headlines, and they say he's running the United States almost like running his company. He might be a successful entrepreneur, a successful businessman, but does he have the skills, and is he a good president? But a lot of people here don't really seem to believe that sentiment. But of course, perhaps the sentiment is different in rural America. So, it is a mixed bag of opinions. So we'll have to sort of see how all of this goes up. In terms of the Modi meet, certainly the Indian American community knows about that. But to the general public, there's a lot of visits and leaders who come from many parts of the world to meet Donald Trump in Washington. So that is perhaps not being talked about just yet, but we'll have to see how all of this unfolds. But certainly the mood, the sentiments when it comes to Donald Trump is what we typically see. You know, was there involvement with the Russian, with Putin when it came to elections? All of those questions people don't know. What about Obamacare? What about taxes? So still a lot of unanswered questions. But one thing that is for sure is people say that Donald Trump certainly has a lot to do, and they're really not sure if he will come back for a second term. But again, still early on, only 6 months, and he's made the headlines almost every other day.
Right. Sanjeev, there we heard Archit, give us a flavor, if you will, of the atmosphere in Washington, D.C. Now, we know that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have spoken on 3 occasions in recent months, but they have not met yet. So, in a sense, as Ambassador Mukherjee says in the studio here, this is essentially a get-to-know-each-other kind of meeting. So, what is the Indian-American community's take on this impending or the forthcoming visit?
Well, yeah, that's also a great question. And as Archit pointed out, the Indian-American community certainly is very well aware of this visit and is looking forward to see what comes about from this visit between the two leaders. There are several events that are going on in Washington around this visit. I mean, they will not probably be of the scale of the Madison Square Garden event where Prime Minister Modi brought in, 20,000 people to watch him in the New York area some years ago. But there is an event with the diaspora organization leaders here in Washington for about, we've heard about 500 to 700 people. And there are several other more intimate, exclusive events that are going on. In diaspora is organizing a couple of events ourselves with members of Congress and with visiting dignitaries. And we've got, some trade associations from India, FICCI, CII, etc., organizing events as well. So the Indian American community, is certainly very excited. If I could just add a couple of quick things here. I think it's a wonderful thing that Donald Trump has announced that Ken Juster, who was a very senior aide on his National Economic Council in the White House, as the next ambassador to India. In diaspora has a long history with Ken Juster, and we think he's a very good choice. And we hope that the Senate confirms him in relatively short order. I think it's a measure of importance that the U.S. assigns to the India relationship, that although the choice of ambassador was much belated, it is nonetheless a person who has the ear of Donald Trump and is a trusted high-level aide. In terms of the future prognosis of relations between the countries, just to take off of what Ambassador Mukherjee just said a short while ago, he's right in saying that there have been a lot of working groups across various different subjects. I think that a couple of things remain to be seen under this new administration, under President Trump. Will the strategic and commercial dialogue continue? We don't know. There is not really an answer to that at this point in time. Will the Global Entrepreneurship Summit that was slated to occur in India, will that happen? We don't know yet. And, the future of defense deals and so forth, all of that, as Archit said in his lead-in, remains to be seen. All in all, the community is very excited, looking forward to the visit, but, let's see what the outcomes are. And I do agree with the ambassador in one regard. Sometimes, even if there is no headline-grabbing outcome, that's fine, that's okay, so long as this initial meeting between the two leaders establishes a good personal rapport with which both of the leaders, would like to establish for future relations between themselves and for the benefit of our two countries.
Right. Ambassador Mukherjee, Prime Minister Modi can be expected, if you look at the agenda of his visit, he's expected to address the CEOs on Sunday morning local time, followed by an interaction with the Indian community that afternoon. And the next day, that's Monday, he's going to have the substantive part of the dialogue with meeting one-on-one with President Trump, and then the delegation level talks, followed by the media statement. Now, as far as the substantive part of the agenda of his visit goes, are we looking at defense, security in particular, yes, trade and investments, other political and economic issues as well?
Well, absolutely. In his one-on-one, as I mentioned, the Prime Minister Modi, as in meetings like this between the heads of state and heads of government, is not going to get into specifics, right, of an item on the trade list or an item, but certainly counterterrorism. He will and President Trump will concentrate, I think, on sharing their thoughts as leaders of the world's most powerful democracy and the leader of the world's most populous democracy, who have a huge amount in common and who have a huge foundation of a multifaceted relationship. They will discuss things that are uppermost in their minds.
True.
What is uppermost in their minds, without doubt, is counterterrorism. What is uppermost in their minds is their domestic agendas and how one can help the other in that.
Sure.
Jobs for President Trump, America's overall role, keeping in mind that he wants to make America great by keeping America first. But no American president is going to ignore the world. And Prime Minister Modi's, I think, uppermost in his mind will be to create that kind of that kind of rapport with President Trump, in which the US president realizes that partnership with India is very much in favor of not just good bilateral relations to end up with a very good joint statement, but really good for both countries.
Absolutely.
So that's as far as the one-on-one goes. This is an occasion to understand each other, to create the kind of chemistry, and from there flows the positive impulses, which then comes to people in the bureaucracy and in the technical arena and in the departments of government, which from this political impulse work closer together. That's how relationships are built. So I'm glad your panelist from the Indian diaspora was there because that again is one of the most important elements in our relationship. Quite apart from interactions during the Prime Minister's visit, there are a couple of points I want to mention about the community that are extremely important.
Right.
One is, this is a community that is extremely highly respected throughout America because of its work ethic, its the aura it has created about its commitment to education and achievement. It is the highest earning community in America, ahead of the white population or the Jewish population or any other sector. Point number one. And secondly, over the years, the Indian community, which much earlier in the 60s and 70s, used to lie low and simply get on with the job and improve themselves and their families and their communities, have become very politically savvy. They are involved in the community leaders. Others are involved in the political play in America. There are any number of young Indian professionals as aides to congressmen, which has resulted, as a matter of fact, in the Congressional Indian Caucus, which is now the biggest of any other caucus in Congress. So, given all that, I think this is an extremely important visit. I think we don't have to concentrate on this or that outcome. As far as the joint statement is concerned, I'm given the fact that regardless of what President Trump said when he withdrew America from the Paris Agreement about India making billions of dollars and China making billions of dollars out of the agreement, that's Trump. That's hyperbole. That's the kind of thing he uses to buttress his own arguments. But the message out of the White House in terms of India has not been negative at all. It's been reasonably, as a matter of fact, at the level of the State Department and the White House officials and so on, have been reasonably positive. I'm quite confident that we'll see a joint statement which reflects a meeting where the two leaders have established a kind of relationship which augurs well for the future.
And Ambassador Mukherjee, very quickly, you mentioned counter-terrorism. Now, when we talk of counter-terrorism, one can't help but mention some countries in India's neighborhood, namely Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Yes.
Also, would you agree that the submission by some people that Trump may not be as bullish on the Obama's pivot to Asia, as it were, or rebalance to Asia, and therefore China may not figure as much in his calculus going forward, and thereby, by extension, India's role in the Indo-Pacific region?
Yes, to the first part of your question, and no to the second. Yes, Pakistan will be mentioned directly or indirectly. President Modi is, quite capable of talking very frankly. Just now, yesterday, a permanent representative at the UN has castigated the Security Council for doing precious little to rein in Pakistan's very open and brazen support of terrorism in the context of Afghanistan, which is one of the highest foreign policy priorities of the United States. The US Congress has resolutions on the table about the Haqqani group and so on and so forth, and about punishing Pakistan, withdrawing a certain level of aid for providing safe haven to terrorists. I mean, these are all things that are happening. These are all, it's in this background, I think, that Prime Minister Modi will certainly bring this up in a discussion on terrorism. Plus, and this is a personal hope, I hope he will agree also to a greater degree of sharing the responsibilities of counterterrorism in our neighborhood. You know, to give the impression that no, we do not want the US to carry all the burden of punishing Pakistan and so on and so forth. We are prepared to do our bit and do most of the heavy lifting. But we do expect the US, as the most influential foreign player in Pakistan, to do its bit as well.
On that note, Ambassador Mukherjee, all my guests, Sanjeev Joshipur and Archit Seshadri, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with me on Gravitas. But stay tuned to Archit's coverage from Washington.
Wow, look at that.
In the age of Donald Trump's Make America Great Again, will Narendra Modi win America again? What will happen to the relationship between India and the United States? I'm Archit Seshadri. Join me as we cover exclusive stories on the ground in Washington, D.C., the stories that matter to you. Everything from trade to technology to terrorism. Watch WION for this exclusive coverage.
All right, time for a short break. More news on the other side. Stay tuned. Don't go anywhere.